Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon.
Hello, good morning.
Good afternoon, Luis. I'm just playing around with my window. Once I extended my screen, Zoom still cannot handle it very well.
Yeah, I know that behavior pretty well. It's very weird. Yeah.
Yeah. So the trick I found is you have to extend before you've opened Zoom. It's kind of like you've initiated Zoom with some set of configuration, and then once you change the configuration, it doesn't drag easily. So let me try to share my screen. Screen. Share. Making sure that I can still see the participant list. I might have to stop sharing because my participant list is not showing. Okay, good morning and good afternoon. I think I see Sanjay joined as well. Okay, I think we have everyone. Can get started. Let me reshare my screen. Cool. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Thanks for confirming, E. And thank you for adding to the attendees list. So let's start with our PRs. Yep, Akash, I've seen several iterations on this PR already. Is this waiting for a final round of approval?
Yeah, so this PR is basically ready to go. Bin, I saw that you left one comment, so I will address that. I've been also working on what the upgrade flow looks like, going from the regular non-HA version up to the HA, which will install the dependencies, and then a downgrade. What does that also look like? So I have like a proposal to introduce something called a Helm file. It's basically an aggregated Helm chart file where you can specify like multiple dependencies as well as intermediate steps to apply some extra custom resources which are required in the HA upgrade process. So I'm thinking I'll pair that with the upgrade scenario document. Bin, I know you mentioned that as a comment. So I'll keep that as a follow-up on this PR. This PR is already pretty big. But I think apart from that, I think it's ready to go. Susan, if you could take maybe another look or give a final approval.
Yeah, sounds good. I have added one other agenda that's on the list today. It's about the experimental flag, and related to that, when you run Ratify with, let's say, HA feature flag, is all our feature flag configurable? Like, for example, HA, the customer might want to, when they didn't have HA in the beginning and then they want to upgrade to the high availability option, we're saying that they should be able to do that without a pod restart. How do we differentiate between feature flags that can be dynamically updated during runtime versus which feature flags cannot be updated? Yeah, so let's discuss it in the following agenda. But I think I will give this PR a review, and I think it's, yeah, I agree, it's ready to go. And just to clarify, the upgrade scenario will be addressed in a separate PR.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next one, adding policy CRD and controller. I think Akash and I have added some comments. Binbin, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just saw your comments and I'll address them today. So I actually have one question. So because I added a new CRD in this PR, so, and also Akash had a question on the version. So currently we have V1 Alpha 1 and V1 Beta 1 for all the CRDs. And for this new CRD, I'm thinking if I should just add it to the V1 Alpha 1, or should we add it to all versions or the latest version V1 Beta 1? I'm not sure which one is the correct approach.
Yeah, we've talked about this in the past as well, where like as we introduce new CRDs, they will all be on different versions. Like in the beginning, the first iteration should always be, they should start with alpha, and then as they change, then our CRDs could be on different versions. But as we GA, maybe we need to bump all our CRDs to a stable version, as we're saying now Ratify is stable. So that's what Binbin and I discussed in the past. Any common practice that we should follow? Any feedback on this, Shui and Sajay?
Oh,
Akash, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna point to Gatekeeper. They also do it in a staggered fashion. So they have some CRs that they've introduced later on, and that's just followed a different cadence. So I don't think we need to standardize across all of our CRDs to be at the same version.
Do you know when they GA, do they move to a unified version?
I'm not sure about that. So they've been doing minor updates for the last, I don't know how long, at least a year plus. So they haven't gone to a major bump from like 3 point whatever to 4 yet. And I don't know if that 4 bump will warrant them all going to stable for all their CRDs.
and I also saw they have a recent PR which just graduate a CRD from alpha to beta.
Got it. So Gatekeeper is already on 3 point something, so they have G8 as a product, but a new CRD will start with alpha again, is what we're observing.
So.
Yep.
Perhaps we
Luis.
should have, yeah, I would say in this one, we should probably have a conversation around with Certach and others that own Gatekeeper to understand what the life cycle of their CRDs is. We could make assumptions here, but let's understand a little bit kind of how they graduate one between different versions for their CRDs. I think this is one where we can learn from them.
Yeah, sure. Cool. Any other items, feedback related to this PR? Okay. Then let us know once it's ready for another iteration or review. And if you need to discuss anything, just ping us anytime.
Yeah, thank you.
Moving on to the agenda items, we have 2 remaining from last week, and the multi-arc support we've discussed offline. Binbin, we agreed that we're going to take that issue in post 1.0, right, to support multi-arc Ratify images.
Yes.
Cool. And we didn't get to talk about this TLS third generation. Let me bring it up and we can discuss it now. Ratify manages the provider and TLS secret creation instead of home chart. And I see it's currently assigned to you, Binbin. I'm not sure if Xinghe or you added this onto the agenda. Do you want to add more details?
Yeah, so I think the issue is that currently we have some Helm function which is like gen VA and gen cert to generate the cert if user didn't provide the TL cert. And but actually when I introduced the cert rotation to Ratify, and it will require the TL cert have the SAN field, but in the Helm function, it doesn't support add a SAN field. So that means the TL cert generated by the Helm function will not be valid to the cert rotation. So even though Helm auto-generate a TL cert, it will still be rotated by the Ratify cert controller. So that means this cert is not valid to the cert rotator. And so Xinghe said maybe we can just remove that.
Got it.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Binbin,
Akash.
yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I was running into an issue with this. I was working on some demos for Ratify, and I'm noticing that sometimes because of the behavior where it'll actually regenerate, the controller will regenerate the certificate, the cert gets remounted into the pod. And because of the whole 1 minute delay, it can take up to 1 minute for Ratify to pick it up, which would mean that if a user installs Ratify and then they immediately try to like run the next quick start step, it'll throw TLS errors because the new cert hasn't been loaded into the pod yet. So the only way I got around that was to actually disable the cert rotator, and then it's just relying upon the Helm chart function.
Yes, that's right. So yeah, for the cert propagation delay, do you think we should fix it before V1 so that the customer will not see this delay issue?
Yeah, I mean, because if I don't think it's reasonable to just say, hey, wait 1 minute and then try the next quick start step, because it's like, hey, I'm moving on to the next thing once it installs the chart. So either one, we just say don't turn on the cert rotator feature flag to being true, or we prioritize fixing the 1 minute delay.
Yeah, I feel we can do the same thing as gatekeeper to add some like tricky annotation to the
Yeah.
part.
it's kind of hacky, but it'll at least, it won't mitigate the problem completely, but it'll definitely minimize the downtime.
Right.
And
And also,
unfortunately, sorry.
okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just thinking for this issue, do we support like removing the third generation code from the Helm chart? So if we remove that, that means, so if user disable the, so if user does provide a TS cert and it's valid, then it's okay. And if they provide an invalid cert, for example, it's expired, then the cert rotator will do the rotation.
From a functional point of view, what is the difference, right? Yes, there's an extra rotation step that happens, but if you don't do the initial cert generation, the outcome is still the same, right? You'll still have to wait a certain period of time before the cert gets picked up by the Ratify pod, right?
Right.
So I think if we left it and for whatever reason someone decided not to set the cert rotator to true, then this would be kind of the fallback option for them to at least have automatic cert generation.
Yes, that's the case I was considering with, I was discussing with Xinghe, and from his point, I think he didn't use this like Helm chart cert generation. But I think for the open source project, maybe someone will need that.
Yeah, my concern is like from the OSS standpoint, like the barrier to get started gets a little higher if they have to generate the certs manually using our make generate certs script versus, you know, having that fallback auto generation that we've been supporting up to now. But you know, if we think that that's not important enough of a concern, then I'm fine with just removing it, but just wanted to point that out.
Binbin, you mentioned Gatekeeper also have this 1 minute issue and they have a workaround around this 1 minute delay. Do they?
Yes, they add some like trivial annotation, and once they update the annotation, it will pick up the new certs immediately.
Would our next step be looking into the same implementation?
Yes, I feel that's the only way for now to fix or to mitigate this issue, but I don't think it's a perfect solution.
Yeah, unfortunately, the cert controller project, we had opened up an issue on this, and actually another user had opened up an issue on this, and the maintainer had basically said that, oh yeah, we understand that it's a limitation, but it's just not prioritized, and if someone else wants to pick it up, we're happy to accept contributions. So that's kind of still in the state it's in.
Got it. I guess, Binbin, can you summarize the different options on this issue, and then we'll use this thread as a discussion.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, and should we, Akash, you said this could be a blocker to the quick start steps. Do you believe this should be in the like an immediate milestone? Currently, this issue has no milestone. So when we triage it, we should just tag it with the milestone just so people know when they expect the fix.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes immediate if they enable the cert rotator feature flag, which is what we have in our quick start right now. But if we don't enable it, then we're going back to our previous scenario where just rotation is not by default enabled. And then for the quick start scenario, it should be okay. So that's like the quick fix option.
Yeah.
We just remove it from the quick start for now.
Why did we decide to put serve rotation as a default for quick start?
I think it could be just to align with our default configuration, but now we see that there's this issue. We might just disable it in the quick start, but it'll still be turned on in our default chart because having set rotation would
Right.
Improve stability.
Okay.
But yeah, turning it off for quick start would be like an immediate actionable item.
That makes sense.
Yeah, next on the agenda, I've added to discuss the RC release date. It's and also creation of like 1.1 milestones. And I've also noticed that like new PRs that we're sending out by default, Jimmy is on the reviewer list. I don't know if it's like, you know, if it's getting spammed by our GitHub emails, like should we remove him? Just discussion around administrative tasks. So let's start with RC7. Luis, what is the current RC7 day and should we move it?
Yeah, so I moved earlier today. I moved it to believe the third week of August. Just because of the conversations we've had around this one in RC7 being one of the final final milestones before we stabilize and do our first stable release. So I mean, obviously I'm happy to discuss if we want to delay the stable release, but from our previous conversations, I think I had it now RC7 to be due by August 25th. And RC8 being a shorter 2-week release for bug fixing, any last stabilizing things, and then stable in September.
Got it. Feynman and E. So I think Luis, to confirm, you said August 18th, right?
August 25th.
August 25th. Okay.
Yep. I do see we have an RC8 milestone and a V1 milestone. They're both in September 8th. So I think at this point, my feel here is we basically do RC7 August 25th, and then we skipped RC8 and we just go the 2-week stabilization period for stable on September 8th. Does that work for people? Again, like I think there might be some conversation around, do we want to include more in stable? Do we want to, so happy to hear people's thoughts. And I probably gonna go into one of Feynman's topics as well. But that's a proposal, having RC7 August 25th and then the 2-week stabilization period.
Any feedback, E, Feynman, and Sajay?
Can we do an internal, or we say, bug bash in the community if RC8 is out? I'm thinking if 2 weeks are enough for us to fix all of those issues that we detected, that we find after RC8.
You mean after RC7? So we're proposing removing RC8 and just do RC7 with the rest of the feature work that we originally planned for stable. I'm open. I mean, I'm open to having more time if needed for stabilizing and fixing bugs for stable. If 2 weeks we don't, if push comes to shove, we can do a bug bash in the community, and provided the feedback, we can make a decision if 2 weeks is enough or if we need more time. But at this point, like from original conversation, September was a target month. We wanted to get a stable out the door. Does that make sense, Feynman?
I didn't get your last point, Luis.
Yes, so September 8th, right? So right now it's 2 weeks after RC7 to have stable, but I think once
you mean RC8, 2 weeks
yeah,
after RC8 to be
no,
stable.
so there is an RC8 right now that falls at the same date as B1. The idea is to not have RC8, have only RC7 with all the feature work that we intend to have in the first stable version. And then 2 weeks after RC7, do stable V1. Now, if it comes to the case where we do a community bug bash, or we are receiving a lot of feedback and we need more time to stabilize what we have in RC7, yeah, I'm open to extending further in September. So instead of 2 weeks, it could be 3 or 4 weeks, depending on where we are. I don't think that like my take right now is that we no longer have an urgency to ship a V1 early in September. We can spend the needed time here on September, but still target either mid or end of September to ship V1.
I agree with the V1 timeline for releasing it before the end of September. And I also noticed that we have only one issue marked as RC8, but that issue is still tentative to support before V1. The plugable design for certificate store,
right?
As it requires a lot of additional efforts to refactor the underlying framework. So I think we may need to migrate that issue out from the RC8.
I mean, I think Susan might have some updates on this one, but yes, we can have a conversation around when do we want that to fall.
So back to the RC7 date. So we'll be looking at RC7 last week of, 25th of August. Cool.
Yes.
It's kind of like weird, like you cannot see the date in the planning, like kind of showing the date for the milestone is kind of important, but they don't have it in this view.
Right. If you go to the milestones view, you can see the dates there.
Milestone view. So this is currently in the planning view, right?
I see. So you're in the
project
so you're in the project. No. So if you go to the pull request to code.
To code, yep.
And then it's not there. Click on any of the commits.
Like that one?
Yep. No, if you scroll down.
Go down.
No, yeah. Well, let me give you a link. Maybe
A link. Okay, I can look into it. Thank you, Luis. And also, like the project view, like I was scrolling around, right? I don't see a RC8 in that view.
Right. I just sent you a link in the message box.
Thanks, Luis. I'll look at it after. And the next one is, Luis, would you be able to create the 1.1 milestone as well?
Yeah, I'll create that as one. So I haven't.
And I guess, Luis, you were saying earlier that we could remove Jimmy and maybe potentially add Jesse.
No. Actually, I had confirmed with Jesse about Jimmy's step down willingness, and also who will be able to join the maintainer seat represent AWS team. So actually, Jimmy is working on East US time zone, so he will be able to join this meeting for the time zone reason. But he mentioned that he will confirm with the AWS team to know who will be able to continuously support and maintain Ratify and be the maintainer seat. He will reply to us maybe a few days later. But before that, let's do nothing on Jimmy's step down or move to the emeritus list until Jimmy send an issue to share his step down willingness, or if there is any issue he submitted before.
Yeah, what was his previous communication like? Was it through a Slack or?
Actually, I think moving people from maintenance list to emeritus list requires a formal or public discussion, especially happened in GitHub. So I would recommend if Jimmy can raise an issue to state his thought to step down, it would be good to us to move him from maintainer to emeritus list. But I would suggest that we wait for Jesse's idea, for Jesse's reply, and then we can ask Jimmy to raise an issue for his step down.
Got it. Yeah, I agree. Cool. So he hasn't formally asked, therefore he gets to be on the list for now.
Sorry, what I'm a little bit ignorant in this. So what's the difference between the maintainer and an emeritus maintainer list?
Eamon, do you know?
Yeah, actually, emeritus list means the maintainers who are not inactive or already stepped down from the maintainer seat. But to memorize those maintenance credit and contribution, open source communities always put their name on the emeritus list, so people can know, oh, those guys had been contributed to this project, but now they stepped down from the maintainer list.
I see. So it's a way
something
to
like reputation list, or
it's the way to kind of keep their legacy, like I acknowledge the legacy they had in the project, but like you mentioned, if they want to refer to their work in other projects and want to make reference to this when it's something that's highly visible for anyone else. Is that
correct?
Okay, good. That's good. Thanks.
Thank you, Feynman. Next one on the agenda, I've created the implement experimental feature flag like we discussed last week. Thank you, Akash. I saw your comment about the existing patterns that Gatekeeper uses. I think it's a good idea, like just adding experimental to all the experimental feature flags. And then once they graduate from experimental, is the idea that we can just either remove the experimental feature flag if they're now a part of core, or we just can move them into like a stable feature flag. Is that the path Gatekeeper follows?
I'm not familiar with how they graduate the feature flag, but that's just how they just prefix with the experimental flag. And my understanding is that I think they just get rid of the flag altogether once it moves out of experimental. But I can follow up to make sure what they actually do there. I saw that notation also has the notation experimental flag, but correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that that flag kind of lights up everything that's experimental and doesn't like differentiate between the different experimental features.
Yeah, there was no reason to have more than one experimental, so it was easy. But Helm had decided to scope a behavior under a specific flag, like Helm _ OCI experimental or something like that. So
I see. Okay.
So if you have
So should
multiple
we follow
features,
specific feature or one flag?
if you have multiple features you want to put in different stages, then yes, multiple flags make sense. But if you have only one feature, then It's not too much value, but maybe next time around the experimental flag might be different, but I think the concept is going to be there either way.
Yeah, we'll review our experimental features. I think right now, the only one is the dynamic plugins.
And then the Dapper will be the second one.
So in your opinion, Akash, should they be separate?
I'm in favor of separating them since they are quite different functionally, but my first thought was, are we going to have like two levels of, you have one experimental flag that you enable, and then you have like a separate feature flag for, but I think that's pretty overkill. So maybe we can just.
No, I wouldn't go for hierarchy. I would just go for, if you have Dapper turned on, just turn it all on, right?
Yeah. Okay.
But if you're depending on something that is turned on previously, then you have to turn these two things on.
Yeah.
I think it might be confused if we name the flag name to Dapper. Dapper has a lot of features, and I think users might be confused. What should they have if they enable Dapper? I would say maybe we can consider rename the feature flag from Dapper to HA, something like that. I think the most purpose for enable Dapper is to enable the HA installation for Dapper and also the unified cache solution, right?
I think that's fair.
Sure.
I mean, you could have Ratify _ HA experimental or something like that, and then go for it, or Ratify experimental _ HA.
Yeah, so in this way, it will be much clarified and specific for users to understand, oh, I enable the feature that I want instead of the open source component that I'm going to enable. So Dapper has a lot of features, right? If we say the feature flag is named Dapper, so I think users might get lost what features they will be enabled. It's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll rename it to the HAs.
Yeah, thanks for the suggestion, Feynman. And on a related note, I've just put in a comment to talk about like which feature flags we have today can be updated runtime versus which ones should not be at runtime. So HA is one of the ones that we think that customer can like scale up and scale down. What about enable TLS certificate bin? Should the customer be able to change that at runtime?
For certain rotation?
Yeah. What other feature flags do we have? So there's HA.
No, I don't think so. Because for the policy provider, I already removed them from the feature flag.
Yeah.
Also, in terms of how they would enable the feature flag, I think the recommended gesture is for a Helm upgrade, right? And they would update the value associated with the Helm, the feature flag. So when you do an upgrade for Helm, it'll spin up a new pod with Ratify, and then once that's alive, the other one is terminated. So I think
it's a restart.
Yeah, it really is a restart without downtime between the two.
Okay, got it. So it's not really updating the configuration at runtime. It's kind of just replacing another instance.
Yeah, that's just how the deployment works currently.
I see. So Feynman, does that align with your vision? So even if the customer turned on HA and they didn't have it before, once they turn it on, it's actually a new instance of Ratify.
Sorry, what do you mean by a new instance of Ratify? Do you mean the issue that I opened before switch from this single Ratify instance to HA mode? I didn't catch your point.
Yeah, I think that also makes sense, right, Akash? Like if they were using in-memory cache, switching to HA, meaning like they're going to move their cache anyway. So there is really nothing to keep from the previous Ratify.
Yeah, so that's from the caching perspective, that makes sense. But like I mean, if you're trying to update a feature flag for like dynamic plugins, that's not cache related. So technically, when you spin up a new pod, you're going to lose all of that in-memory caching. I think this is just, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just typically how Helm upgrades work. They just they recreate the resources and then slowly drain the old resources to limit downtime. But I don't think there's like a recycle the same pod and update the application. I know Sajid was working on that ORSPV, and maybe that would have allowed someone to do that with a hot swap of like a live application using the same pod resource. But at the Helm level with resources, I don't know if there's another way to do it.
Sorry, which one is this for? This was sort update?
I think in general, like how when we do a Helm upgrade, it's actually recreating the Ratify pod. So the whole application instance is a new one.
Right.
So if you have any sort of in-memory resources, those get recreated.
No, I think the whole point of HA is you should not have to depend so much on what is there in memory state, right? And my understanding is that this is normal standard operating procedure to kind of like do the upgrade, let the old pods die so the traffic can migrate, and yes, in memory state slowly kind of moves along the way. Is there anything different that we're doing that others don't operate with? Like,
yeah, I'm not aware of us doing anything different. I just thought this is how it's done. But if there's another way that it's done, if anyone else knows.
yeah. I mean,
I think if this is standard behavior, like if we have any documentation, we can just like if you change the feature flag and you do an upgrade, it's kind of like a hot swap sort of thing.
it's a rolling upgrade, right? So you end up
Yeah.
with new pods. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, E has.
Oh, hi, E.
Yeah. Yeah, I have one question. So if the current Ratify instance, for example, is communicating with gatekeeper, right? There is a TLS connection. So once we did this, we triggered this rolling upgrade, there will be a new Ratify instance, and the new Ratify instance will take new request, right, from gatekeeper. But for the current Ratify instance, it will be terminate, right, in some way. So if the current connection, I mean the current TLS connection with gatekeeper, I mean that if that job is not done, that means that deployment, I mean that image deployment will fail, right?
Unless they have retry logic, I think that they will fail.
I think that's actually a really good point. I need to look at the code again, but the way the termination works is that it's supposed to be a soft termination. So the server is supposed to gracefully exit before the resource is cleaned up. So I need to see if like, is it going to just drop the connection, or is it going to actually complete the request before terminating? So
Yeah, I think
that's one follow-up to look at.
Yeah, if it is a graceful shutdown for the existing instance, I think then the upgrade should be fine. The default behavior is the rolling upgrade, and also the existing instance will be graceful shutdown. So there will be no impact for our users. But
Yeah,
this needs
makes
to be
sense.
verified, right? Yeah.
Thank you. I'll take a note, Akash, to confirm the grace exit possibility.
Sure. I'll follow up and look at that.
Thank you. Let me clean up my tabs quickly. Oops, other tabs. Yeah, the next one on the agenda is I just want to go through my investigations for the Go plugins. So
Sorry, Susan.
go ahead, Payman.
May I prioritize the last topic, as I will need to drop this meeting maybe a few minutes later. So
Yeah,
I want
sure.
first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I think I just need 2 or 3 minutes to discuss this proposal. So as you may already know that we have the new Ratify website launched 2 weeks ago, but the documentation is still not migrated yet. So, and we also refactored some links by Joshua, and we received the feedback from AWS JC that he mentioned there are a couple of links redirect from AWS website to the Ratify documentation, which are broken. So as we are also planning to migrate the content from the Ratify source code repo to the new website. So I think it's time to set up this issue and see if there's any concerns from our Ratify team or from our partners. So I think the general purpose is to start migrate the docs from the Ratify source code repo, from the docs directory to the new Ratify web repository, and all of those docs will be live at the ratify.dev/docs. And the documentation directory structure will also be refactored after this migration. So if we have any links, any external links redirect to the Ratify docs, I think we may need to consider changing, especially the links which are hard code in the source code or any place. Yeah, this is an issue to share and to check if any dependency related to those docs. And from the AWS side, JC will help to validate and review the content related to the AWS product during this migration. So let me know if you have any concerns about this migration. I think we will be able to start this migration next week, and I will work with Jack to finish this migration. I think it may take more than 1 week to finish all of those content migration. And also for those content which are out of date, we will also need to update it to align with the latest version of Ratify during this migration. So it's not only migration, we will also to check the content itself, as we are very close to the first stable release. I think the documentation is required.
Yeah.
I guess.
Any feedback, anyone?
Yeah, I guess we don't have any hard code and any links wishing the Ratify redirect to the docs, right?
One question, is there a possibility that since we're migrating the docs to this new repo, is it possible to generate some way a redirects to the new repo from the old links? I'm trying to see if it's a way to resolve if somebody's like, let's say there's like a blog somewhere that's referencing the old repo, is it possible to merge somehow the domains in a way that it'll always, whenever somebody tries to access the old domain, it will redirect automatically to the new one?
I think this is a good suggestion, but it's not that feasible. So we can definitely configure the root, or we said redirect rules for the Ratify, the original Ratify doc URL to the Ratify website, the ratify.dev. But we are not only migration, we will also change the documentation directory structure.
That's true.
Fit. Yeah, so I think there might be some links changed after the migration, and I think the current documentation directory structure is not that reasonable. So we will also refactor that structure.
I mean, the other thing we can do is just basically redirect everything to like a blank page that says the docs have migrated to this new domain, right?
Yeah.
Whenever anyone tries to, like, I think that's kind of what people tend to use or do with these kind of migrations. Like, whenever somebody tries to access any of the docs root, they basically say the documents have now moved to this other, and then I think that's a way to kind of have everyone sort of change their blog links or things like that. That might be a way to mitigate, or to at least make people aware of the new place where the docs live.
That's fair.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a good proposal.
Yeah, Feynman, who's gonna be doing the migration?
I think I will ask Zach to help, as we have notation V1 released very soon. So after notation V1, Zach will be relaxed, and we may need Zach to help work on the Ratify documentation. I'm discussing with Zach about this, the workload change. But I think after notation V1 is out, Ratify documentation will be one of the priorities for us.
No, that makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for driving this, Feynman.
Yeah, thanks. Back to Susan.
Thanks. Yeah, so I've played around with some plugin options, and I'm Shui brought up earlier this week, I think, in one of the syncs, that given this could be post GA post GA, I would actually pause on the gRPC design and move on to doing some more important bug fix, like the get secrets for the AKV integration. But I thought I still want to document my findings and kind of share with everybody. And then later, when we're ready to start again, like I can pick this up again. But I want to have 5 minutes just to go through the findings. So the first option that we looked at was, can we use the Golang plugin package? It seems to be like a simple way where the plugin author could implement some interface, and Ratify would be able to kind of load the plugin with the Golang support. But soon we realized there's like some major limitations, like going through the documentation. The first thing that popped out was they only support like Linux and does not support Windows. And reading through some like Reddit thread, a lot of users actually complained that the plugin must be compiled with the exact same version of the host. And a lot of people do like not magic, but like hacky things where they export some variable to say, the host is compiling with this Golang version. Now go update your plugin and make sure you compile with this specific version for this to work. So I think Golang plugin package is not an option. So the other option that I looked into was using like plain gRPC. But the downside for that is I think Kara's documentation mentioned, like, we have to manage the discoverability. We have to manage like what port different plugins are running on. So we have to manage the client and server communication. But the whole using plain gRPC is quite, is straightforward, but maybe compared to the HashiCorp Go plugin is very, it's more low level. So the next option that I looked into was the HashiCorp Go plugin, which a lot of people who complained about the Golang plugin moved to using HashiCorp Go plugin. So from their page, their goal for the HashiCorp Go plugin is that the plugin author should be as simple. It wasn't as simple as implementing an interface, but their goal was like, as a plugin user, like you just have some method that you want to, a functionality that you want to implement. And for Ratify or the plugin caller, you should be able to call that function as if it was in the same process. And the plugin platform actually handles the communication in between, so you don't like have to define different ports that you need to run on. So I tried it out and my experience was good. So I've tried to document the high level steps here. So similar to the gRPC service, like step 1, Ratify would have to define the service that we're exposing. So taking certificate store plugin as an example, like currently I just exposed a like get method in my prototype. And I define the response and the request interfaces kind of like, so for example, our current certificate store get certificate method, it's like a map of key value pairs, like where you say this is the key vault URI, this is the certificate name, this is the version number. So that maps to a this structure that I've defined, and it's a key value entry, and there's like repeated entries in our map. Then step 2, there is some implementation of the gRPC interfaces, but they're pretty simple boilerplate things. And I think they're implemented by Ratify, not the plugin author. So as a plugin author, to summarize, they would serve a plugin from the main function, and it's pretty standard, like all the plugins would have a main method, and their business logic would be to implement the get certificate call. And in here, I just call into our existing certificate provider, but in the future, we would refactor different providers out. So the implementation of the plugin would just call the library of the certificate provider. And once the plugin author have this in, like they can keep this code in their repository, and they would build it very similar to how they build a verifier plugin today. I don't have the right exact command here, but it's just like a go build command. Then in the host, Ratify could find the plugin using like as if we're executing it, but this plugin path would be following our current existing mechanism where the plugin author builds their plugin, copy it to some directory, and we try to find the plugin in the maybe the default path or whatever they have whatever they have configured in the plugin CRD. And then we will start a client, we'll try to find the plugin, and we'll call the method that we exposed through, like in this example, like we found the plugin, it's certificate store, and we just call the get, and we pass in the request object. In this case, it's the attribute map. So I played around with it. It was pretty straightforward to me. But I haven't gotten to investigating like the plugin authentication, and also the HashiCorp plugin is under MPL 2.0 license, which I had a check with Shuwei this, I think on Monday. It seems to be fine. So I currently had a good experience with HashiCorp, but also Shuwei mentioned other projects have chosen not to use it in the past. So just want to collect some feedback on have we used HashiCorp Go plugin in other projects, and how was the experience? But yes, this summarizes my the options that I've investigated so far. Akash, Binbin, Sajay, any feedback on potentially using the HashiCorp plugin?
Okay, can we share the cache in this approach?
Can we share the cache? I was thinking, like, since last week, I talked about, like, if we were to, I think from last week, my learning is I don't want to do a lot of refactoring from moving things from Ratify into some gRPC server that we manage. So I was thinking, like, taking the certificate store as an example, the plugin would return maybe like an array of certificates or an array of like certificates as bytes. The Ratify host would continue managing the certificate and saving into the cache. So the plugin should be unaware of the cache for the certificate store case. Does that answer your question, Binbin?
Yeah, but if we apply the same pattern to like verify and store, I guess we still need to
yeah, they would
cache.
need to.
Yep. Because the verifier recreates the Aura store, and we've given the verifier the freedom of choosing what content it wants. So unfortunately, it can't just be, the interaction is not opaque in terms of like what data it can provide. So
I see. Do they share cache today in is existing plugin model for verifiers?
no, so if it's a built-in verifier, it's fine because it's running in the same process. But if you're running like Cosine or SBOM, then no, there's no sharing of any resources.
I see. Yeah, I'll add it to the pending investigations, but I feel like this is running as separate process. So it's actually maybe very similar to how the existing plugins are today. So I suspect they won't be able to access the same cache. Is that what you think, Akash?
Yeah, I think that might be like a separate problem in terms of how we've set things up. We would need to explore separately, but in terms of this gRPC migration, I think this HashiCorp library is pretty promising. I'd be curious to read a little bit more about it if you have any documentation or even the, I guess
I've the title is the link to the GitHub repository, and they have lots of examples.
Okay.
So the GitHub project would be where to start.
Okay, sounds good.
Just checking if Shuwei is on the call, because Shuwei, you've mentioned there's some investigation previous. I wonder, I did a quick search. I couldn't find any previous investigation on it. I wonder if you like recall why we didn't choose the HashiCorp Go plugin for a different project.
Yeah, maybe I can just search again offline and just send the result to you if I find anything special.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we're over time already. If we can have follow-up discussions, and there's an issue. I think I'll post the issue to the notes later. Like we can use the enable gRPC communication as a discussion thread if you have any thoughts about HashiCorp plugin later. Cool. Anything else before we wrap up today? Okay. Thanks for joining, everyone. Take care. I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Susan.
You.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank
Bye.
you. And bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.